A betrayal or a new beginning? The sweetest taste of revenge. The sound of the key turning in the lock used to be the melody of home, the signal that her world was complete. But on a rainy Tuesday in October, it became the echo of a shattered life. For Sophia, 8 months pregnant and humming a lullaby in a room she had painted a cheerful yellow, that sound marked the end of everything she knew. Her husband, Matteo, didn't just walk out the door. He destroyed their shared future for a life with another woman, leaving Sophia with nothing but a mountain of debt and a child he no longer wanted. This is not just a story of heartbreak. It's the tale of a woman who, finding herself in ruins, chose not to cry, but to build an empire from the dust. Interactive question. Before we continue, I'd like to know, have you ever faced a moment that felt like the end, only to discover a new beginning? Share your story in the comments. And if you're enjoying this, give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories of resilience. The unraveling, the air in the small apartment on Elm Street was thick with the smell of fresh paint and the impending arrival of happiness. Sophia stood in the doorway of what would soon be the baby's room, one hand protectively on her swollen belly. The walls were a cheerful shade of yellow, the color of sunflowers and new beginnings. A half-assembled white bassinet stood in a corner. For the past 3 weeks, this room had been her sanctuary, a physical manifestation of the love she felt for the tiny life growing inside her, and for the man with whom she shared that life, her husband, Matteo. He was late tonight, but it wasn't unusual. As a senior partner at the prestigious architecture firm Velasco and Solis, long hours were the norm. It was the price they paid for this life, the cozy apartment, the dinners out, the future that shone so brightly on the horizon, a future that included their son, whom they had already decided to name Leon. Sophia smiled, tracing the outline of a cloud she had just painted above the bassinet. Leon's own little sky. The familiar sound of the key in the lock jolted her from her reverie. "Matteo, you're home," she called out, her voice filled with relief. "I just finished the clouds. You have to see them." She walked out of the room, wiping her hands on her jeans, a smile at the ready. But it vanished the moment she saw him. He was standing in the entryway, his expensive coat dripping rainwater onto the doormat. His face, usually so open and expressive, was a hard, closed mask. He wasn't looking at her, but through her, his gaze fixed on some point in the distance. He held his leather briefcase in one hand, gripping it so tightly his knuckles were white. "Matteo, is everything all right at work?" she asked, her heart beginning a slow, nervous beat against her ribs. He finally looked into her eyes, and the coldness in them was a physical blow. This was not the man who whispered dreams to her in the dark, who had gently kissed her belly just that morning. He was a stranger. "We need to talk, Sophia." His voice was flat and devoid of emotion. He made no move to take off his coat or to kiss her. "Okay," she said. Slowly, her hand instinctively returning to her stomach. "Let me get you a towel." "No," he snapped, the word so sharp it made her flinch. "Just sit down." He gestured toward the living room sofa, the one they had chosen together, playfully arguing over fabric swatches. She moved toward it as if in a daze, every instinct screaming that her world was about to be knocked off its axis. He remained standing, like a prosecutor facing a defendant. "I'm not happy, Sophia," he began, the words clinical and rehearsed. "I haven't been for a long time." Sophia stared at him, bewildered. "What are you talking about? We were planning the baby shower last week. You were so excited." "Maybe." A flicker of something crossed his face. I was trying to make it work for the sake of the situation." "The situation?" she repeated, the word tasting like poison. "You mean our baby? Our son?" "It's not that simple," he said, now pacing, his movement agitated. There's someone else. The three words hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen out of the room. Sophia felt as if she had been plunged into icy water. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. The yellow baby room, the half-built bassinet, the smell of paint. It all seemed to belong to a different life, to a different woman. Who? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Her name is Valeria, he said. And the way he said the name, with a kind of reverence, was another knife in her heart. She's a new partner at the firm, a client on the Mirador development project. We've been seeing each other for 6 months. 6 months. The timeline crashed into her mind. 6 months ago, they were celebrating their 2nd anniversary. 6 months ago, they were joyfully trying to conceive. He was with this Valeria while he was holding her, while they were planning their family, while he was telling her he loved her. The nausea rising in her throat had nothing to do with her pregnancy. She understands me, Sophia, Matteo continued, his voice gaining a self-righteous conviction. She sees my ambition. We connect on a level that you and I no longer have. A level I don't have. Sophia found her voice, a tremor of fury running through it. I gave up my career as a graphic designer to support yours. I moved to this city for you. I am carrying your son, Matteo. What level of connection is deeper than that? It's not about that, he said, waving a hand dismissively. It's about intellectual synergy, a shared vision for the future. Valeria and I will be a power couple. We're closing a multi-million-dollar deal in Marbella next month. He spoke of Marbella and power couples, while she stood in their 2-bedroom apartment, covered in paint, her body heavy with his child. The sheer cruelty of it all was breathtaking. So what happens now? She asked. Her voice dangerously low. I'm leaving. I've already put a deposit down on a new apartment with Valeria, in the Zenith Tower, he said, naming one of the city's most exclusive buildings. My things are being collected tomorrow. My lawyer will be in contact with you for arrangements. The finality was absolute. There was no discussion, no remorse. It was a business transaction, a life, a marriage, a family being liquidated. Arrangements, she repeated, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. You can't be serious, Matteo. Look at me. I'm 8 months pregnant with your child. You can't just leave. This is the part I knew you wouldn't understand, he sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. The baby complicates things, I admit, but it doesn't change the fundamental truth. I'm in love with Valeria. Being here with you would be a lie, and I won't live a lie. So you lived a lie for 6 months instead, she shot back, her hurt momentarily eclipsed by a searing rage. He had the decency to look away. I wanted to find the right time. The right time? When, Matteo? After our son was born? Were you going to wait until I was in labor to tell me you had a new family? He didn't answer. He simply walked over to the desk in the corner and pulled out a checkbook. He scribbled something quickly, tore out the check, and placed it on the coffee table. This should cover you for a few months, he said, his tone that of a man settling a bill. To get you on your feet. Sophia looked at the slip of paper. It felt like the ultimate insult. He thought he could buy his way out of his vows, his responsibilities, his own child. She stood up, her body trembling, and walked over to the table. She picked up the check, looked him directly in the eye, and slowly tore it into 4 perfect squares. She let the pieces fall from her fingers to the floor. I don't want your money, she said, her voice shaking but firm. I want you to leave. Now, for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty appeared in his eyes. He had expected tears, pleading, hysteria. He had not expected this cold, defiant strength. It unsettled him. Without another word, he turned and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the knob. My lawyer is Roberto Perez, he said, still with his back to her. He'll be in touch. And then he was gone. The door closed, a sound of deep, irreversible finality. The silence it left behind was a deafening roar. Sophia stood frozen in the middle of the living room, the torn pieces of the check at her feet. Her gaze drifted to the open doorway of the baby's room, to the yellow walls, and the empty, half-built bassinet. The smell of paint was no longer cheerful. It was suffocating. She dropped to her knees, a single, guttural sob tearing from her chest. Her hands wrapped around the child that the man she loved had just abandoned. The perfect life she had so carefully painted had just been swept away by a storm she never saw coming. The sweetness of resilience, the first few days after Matteo left, were a blur of disbelieving silence. The apartment, once a cozy haven, transformed into a hollow, echoing tomb. Every object was a painful reminder. The coffee cup with a chip on the rim that was his. The indentation on his side of the bed. The solitary sock she found under the sofa. Sophia moved through the rooms like a ghost, touching the surfaces of a life that was no longer hers. The moving company had been brutally efficient, stripping the apartment of Matteo's presence in less than an hour, leaving conspicuous, dustless rectangles on the bookshelves and empty spaces on the walls where his architectural prints had hung. Reality hit, not as a single wave, but as a series of relentless, chilling tides. The first was financial. When she went to pay for groceries, her debit card was declined. A humiliating call to the bank confirmed her fears. The joint account had been emptied. Matteo had taken it all, leaving only the exact amount of the check he had offered, and she had torn up. Her name wasn't on the lease. It was a corporate apartment rented through Velasco and Solis. An eviction notice, polite but firm, arrived within the week. She had 30 days to vacate. The emotional toll was even greater. Sleep offered no escape. Her dreams were filled with the cold, dismissive look in Matteo's eyes. She would wake up gasping for air, her hand flying to her stomach. The baby's kicks, a frantic, fluttering reminder of her terrifying new reality. She was going to be an unemployed, soon-to-be homeless single mother. Her best friend, Isabel, became her lifeline. A fiercely loyal and pragmatic ER nurse, Isabel showed up the day after Matteo left, with 2 large bags of groceries and a storm cloud on her face. She offered no empty promises or soft sympathies. She took one look at Sophia's pale, tear-streaked face, hugged her tightly, and then got to work. "All right," Isabel said, her voice brisk as she began to unpack the groceries. "First we eat, then we make a plan. Crying is allowed, but only for 20-minute intervals. After that, we get organized." Sophia, who hadn't eaten a decent meal in 2 days, could only nod in a daze. Isabel made her a simple omelet and toast, sitting with her at the small kitchen table as she ate in silence. "Did he say anything else?" Isabel asked softly, her earlier brusqueness softening. Sophia shook her head, moving a piece of egg around on her plate. "Just that his lawyer would be in touch. Roberto Perez." Isabel's eyes narrowed. "Perez. Of Perez, Klein and Associates. He's a shark, Sophia. A corporate barracuda. Matteo isn't just leaving you. He's preparing for war." "I know." The thought sent a new wave of panic through Sophia. War. She didn't have the energy to get out of bed, let alone fight a legal battle with a high-powered attorney. "What do I do, Asa?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "I have nothing. He controlled all the finances. I quit my job. My savings are nearly gone. This apartment is the first thing we're going to solve." Isabel finished for her. "You're moving in with me. It's not negotiable. My guest room is a mess, but it's a room. It's safe." The offer was so kind, so simple, it broke through Sophia's numbness. Fresh tears sprang to her eyes. This time, tears of gratitude. "I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking. I'm telling you," Isabel said firmly. "We've been friends since we were 10, and we survived Mrs. Juarez's chemistry class together. We can survive this, you idiot. Now, finish your eggs." The call from Roberto Perez came 2 days later. His voice was smooth, polished, and utterly devoid of warmth. He informed Sofia that Mateo was offering her a one-time settlement of 10,000 euros, contingent on her signing a confidentiality agreement and waiving all future claims for spousal or child support. "Child support," Sofia repeated, her voice trembling with rage. "He's disavowing all rights to his own child." "Mr. Mateo feels it's better to make a clean break," Perez replied coldly. "He believes a lump sum payment provides you with the immediate resources to start a new life, untethered by future entanglements." Untethered by his own child. The sanitized corporate language made it all the more grotesque. "Tell Mr. Mateo," Sofia said, her voice dripping with ice, "to go to hell." She hung up the phone, her hand shaking. The bravado lasted about 5 minutes before the crushing weight of her situation returned. She was turning down 10,000 euros, money she desperately needed, on principle. But what good was principle when you couldn't afford diapers? The lowest point came a week before she was due to move. She was trying to pack, but the task felt monumental. Every box she filled was an admission of defeat. She sank to the floor of the half-dismantled baby room, surrounded by boxes of tiny clothes and unread parenting books. The yellow walls seemed to mock her with their false cheer. The grief was a physical weight pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She felt utterly and completely alone. She wasn't just losing a husband. She was losing the entire future she had believed in. She was a discarded, pregnant woman, a nobody that no one wanted. She curled into a ball, her body shaking with sobs, her hands clutching her belly as Leon kicked within her, oblivious to his mother's despair. She cried for her lost love, for her unborn son's lost father, and for her own shattered identity. She cried until she had no more tears left, leaving her feeling hollow, a fragile shell of the woman she used to be. Lying there on the cold hardwood floor, surrounded by the ruins of her life, Sofia had finally hit rock bottom. The silence of the empty apartment was broken only by her ragged breathing. There was nowhere to go but up. But in that moment, she couldn't even imagine how to stand. A new empire. The first few weeks in Isabel's apartment were a period of suspended animation. Sofia existed in a fog, moving between the guest bed and the living room sofa. Isabel was a patient and unyielding presence, leaving her food, checking in, but mostly giving her the space to grieve. She handled the logistics of moving Sofia's remaining belongings into a small storage unit, a task for which Sofia was infinitely grateful. The turning point didn't come with a dramatic epiphany, but with a quiet, mundane craving. One gloomy afternoon, as rain lashed against the window, Sofia was assailed by a sudden and intense desire for her grandmother's lemon and lavender cake. It was a taste of her childhood, a treat of comfort and unconditional love. Her grandmother, Leonore, had been a baker, her kitchen a magical place of warmth, sugary air, and gentle wisdom. She had passed away 3 years prior, leaving Sofia her prized handwritten recipe book. On a whim, Sofia asked Isabel if she still had the box labeled Fragile Kitchen from the storage unit. Isabel, sensing the first flicker of life in her friend in weeks, retrieved it that night. Sofia carefully lifted the worn, leather-bound book from the box. Its pages were brittle and stained with vanilla and butter, the familiar cursive script a balm to her soul. She found the recipe, its instructions intertwined with Leonore's small notes. Be patient with the zest. That's where the sunshine lives. Isabel's kitchen was small, but it had the basics. Sophia found flour, sugar, eggs. She sent Isabel out for lemons and dried lavender. As she began to measure and mix, something inside her started to shift. The rhythmic, familiar actions were meditative. Creaming the butter and sugar, zesting the lemons, folding in the flour. Each step was a small, manageable task in a life that felt overwhelmingly chaotic. The simple act of creation was an antidote to the destruction she had suffered. As the cake baked, a fragrant, hopeful aroma filled the small apartment, chasing away the stale air of despair. When it was done, she dusted it with a simple glaze and sprinkled lavender buds on top. It looked exactly as she remembered it. She and Isabel sat at the small kitchen table, and each took a bite. The taste was a revelation. Bright, sweet, floral, and deeply comforting. It tasted like sunshine. It tasted like hope. For the first time in over a month, Sophia felt a genuine smile in her eyes. "It's good," she said, surprised by the simple pleasure it brought her. "Good?" Isabel exclaimed, her mouth full. "Sophia, this is art. This is the best cake I have ever eaten in my life. No exaggeration." That night, Sophia couldn't sleep. But for the first time, it wasn't from anxiety. An idea, fragile but persistent, had taken root in her mind. What if she could do this, not just for herself, but as a way to build a life? The next morning, she baked again. A dark chocolate and sea salt tart, then a batch of oatmeal cookies with cardamom and orange zest. Isabel took the extras to the hospital, and her colleagues devoured them in minutes. Nurses started stopping by her apartment on their way home, giving Sophia money and asking if she had any more of those cookies. A small, home-based business was born out of Isabel's kitchen. Sophia started an Instagram page, posting simple, beautiful photos of her creations. She named her fledgling business Sabore de Hogar, Tastes of Home. The name felt right. She wasn't just selling baked goods. She was selling comfort, a small piece of sanctuary in a chaotic world. Orders started coming in from friends of friends, then from strangers. She specialized in unique flavor combinations inspired by her grandmother's book, things you couldn't find at a typical bakery. Her days took on a new rhythm. She woke early, baked while the city was still quiet, managed her orders and social media, and rested in the afternoon. The work was demanding, especially in her final weeks of pregnancy, but it was hers. Every euro she earned, every rave review she received was a brick in the foundation of her new life. One of her regular customers was a kind, elderly gentleman named Don Carlos, who lived in the same apartment building. He ordered a small cake every Friday, always paying with a 20-euro note and telling her to keep the change. He was a retired accountant with a sharp mind and twinkling eyes. One Friday, as she delivered his weekly rosemary and pear tart, he invited her in for a cup of tea. "Young lady," he said, after they had chatted for a while about her fledgling business, "you have a remarkable product and a tremendous work ethic, but you are thinking far too small." Sophia was taken aback. "I'm just trying to make enough to pay for diapers, Don Carlos." "Nonsense," he scoffed gently. "An artist should never settle for just selling sketches. You have a brand here, a story. Have you considered a spot at the weekend farmers market or approaching local cafes?" He then spent an hour talking her through the basics of a business plan, profit margins, and scalability. He saw something in her that she hadn't dared to see in herself. Not a victim, but an entrepreneur. The conversation with Don Carlos lit a fire in her. He didn't just offer advice. He offered a roadmap. He helped her register her business, apply for a spot at the prestigious downtown farmers market, and create a simple yet effective budget. He even offered her a small, interest-free loan of €2,000 from his own savings to cover the initial market stall setup costs, telling her to consider it an old man's investment in a sweeter future. 2 weeks before her due date, Sophia worked her first day at the farmer's market. She was exhausted, her back ached, and she was terrified that no one would buy anything. She sold out in 3 hours. Standing behind her small table, surrounded by the fruits of her labor, giving a customer their change. While her baby kicked gently within her, Sophia felt a profound sense of accomplishment. It was a small victory, but it was a start. She was no longer just surviving. She was building. One cake at a time. The price of a perfect lie. Leon was born on a cool November morning. A healthy, beautiful baby boy with a shock of blonde hair and his mother's determined eyes. Holding him in her arms for the first time, Sophia felt a love so fierce and absolute, it eclipsed all the pain that had come before. This perfect little human was her why. He was the reason she had to succeed, the motivation behind every early morning and every late night. The first few months were a whirlwind of sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and the constant sweet aroma of baking and baby powder. Juggling a newborn and a growing business was the hardest thing Sophia had ever done. She baked with Leon, sleeping in a sling against her chest. The rhythmic hum of the mixer often lulled him to sleep. She learned to write emails with one hand while breastfeeding, to negotiate with suppliers while cradling a fussy baby. Isabel remained her rock, often coming home from a grueling 12-hour shift at the hospital and taking Evan so Sophia could get a few precious hours of uninterrupted work or sleep. The farmer's market stall became a local sensation. People lined up for her unique creations, the lemon and lavender cake, the sea salt and dark chocolate tart, the Earl Grey tea scones. She had a story that resonated with people, the single mother building a life for her son. A local food blogger wrote a glowing article titled, "The Sweetest Revenge," and suddenly, Sabor de Hogar was the talk of the town. The income from the market and a few steady cafe orders were enough to get by, but Sophia knew she couldn't operate from Isabel's tiny kitchen forever. The loan from Don Carlos had been a blessing, but she needed real investment to grow. She spent her nights after Leon was asleep, meticulously refining the business plan. Don Carlos had helped her create. She researched commercial kitchen rentals, packaging costs, and potential storefront locations. Her big break came from an unexpected source. One of the cafes she supplied, the Daily Grind, was a small independent chain with 3 locations. The owner, a shrewd businesswoman named Sarah Chen, was impressed not only with Sophia's products, but with her professionalism and drive. "Your stuff flies off the shelves," Sarah told her one afternoon as Sophia made her weekly delivery. "And your branding is fantastic. People aren't just buying a cookie. They're buying the Sabores de Hogar story. What's your next move?" Sophia, emboldened by weeks of research, took a deep breath. "I want to open my own shop, a small bakery and cafe, a place that feels like a true refuge." Sarah listened intently as Sophia laid out her vision. She showed her the business plan, the market sales figures, the projected growth. Sarah, who had built her own business from a single coffee cart, recognized the same spark in Sophia. "I know a space," Sarah said, a thoughtful look on her face. "On Hawthorne Avenue. It used to be a bookstore. The rent is high, but the foot traffic is incredible. It would be perfect for you." She paused, then added, "And I know some investors who are looking for exactly this kind of local, passion-driven, and scalable business. Let me make a call. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. Sophia was terrified. She bought a new blazer at a second-hand store, created a professional presentation, and arranged for Isabel to watch Leon. She walked into a sleek, intimidating boardroom to pitch her dream to two poker-faced investors, Sarah's friends. She spoke with a passion and clarity that surprised even herself. She didn't just talk about profit margins and customer acquisition. She talked about the feeling of home, the power of comfort, and the legacy she wanted to build for her son. At the end of her presentation, there was a long silence. Then, one of the investors, a woman named Catalina Royce, leaned forward. "That was one of the most compelling proposals I've heard all year. We're in." They offered her an initial investment of 75,000 euros for a minority stake in the business. It was more money than Sophia had ever imagined. She walked out of this building in a daze, the signed agreement in her hand, feeling it was heavier and more valuable than gold. Meanwhile, miles away, in the sterile luxury of the Zenith Tower, Matteo's life was not the glittering success he had imagined. Valeria was beautiful, ambitious, and exciting, but she was also demanding and materialistic. Their power couple life was a performance, a curated series of expensive dinners, charity galas, and Instagram posts. There was a hollowness to it, a transactional quality that left Matteo feeling strangely empty. He thought of Sophia occasionally, usually late at night. He imagined she had probably moved back home to her parents, defeated. He pictured her with the baby, his child, a complication he had successfully excised from his new, sleek life. He once saw the food blog article about sabores de hogar on a shared social media feed. He had scoffed. "Good for her," he had told Valeria with a dismissive flick of his wrist. "Making little cakes, how quaint." Valeria had glanced at the article. Her perfectly sculpted lips tightened into a thin line. "Is that the woman you left?" she asked, a hint of something unreadable in her voice. "She looks resourceful." Matteo didn't recognize the woman in the article, smiling with confidence behind a table laden with beautiful pastries. The Sophia he had left was broken, crying on the floor of their apartment. This new version was a stranger to him, and a small, unwanted seed of curiosity was planted in his mind. He quickly dismissed it. He had made his choice. He had chosen power, ambition, and Valeria. He had everything he ever wanted. Or so he told himself. The final confrontation, back on Hawthorne Avenue, Sophia signed the lease for her new bakery. The space was dusty and smelled of old paper, but it had large front windows and beautiful exposed brick walls. Standing in the middle of the empty room, with Leon cooing in his baby carrier, she could see in her mind's eye the glass display cases filled with treats, the small wooden tables where people would gather, the open kitchen where she would create her future. It wasn't a half-painted baby room built on a lie. This was real, and it was all hers. 6 months after securing the investment, the Sabores de Hogar bakery opened its doors. The transformation from the old bookstore was breathtaking. Sophia, using her dormant graphic design skills, had created a space that was the physical embodiment of its name: warm, inviting, and elegant. The exposed brick, reclaimed wood, soft lighting, and the irresistible aroma of baking butter and sugar created an atmosphere that was instantly soothing. The opening day was a phenomenal success. The line stretched down the block, driven by the bakery's considerable social media buzz and local press coverage. Sophia, moving between greeting customers and putting the finishing touches on a fresh batch of croissants, felt a joy so pure it almost made her cry. Isabel was there, effortlessly running the cash register, and Don Carlos sat at a corner table, beaming with a grandfather's pride. Even Sarah Chen from the Daily Grind stopped by, giving Sophia a knowing, triumphant smile. This was her victory, witnessed by the small town that had helped her build it. The bakery quickly became a beloved neighborhood institution. It was more than a place to grab coffee and a pastry. It was a community hub. Sophia knew her regular customers by name. She hired her first 2 employees, a young, aspiring pastry chef and a friendly barista, freeing her up to focus on developing new recipes and managing the business. She was no longer just a baker. She was a CEO, a boss, a job creator. Her success did not go unnoticed by Matteo. He drove past the bakery one afternoon, on his way to a meeting. He saw the cheerful, professionally designed logo, the crowd of people inside, the warm glow spilling out onto the street. He saw Sophia through the window, laughing with a customer, looking radiant and confident. She wore a stylish apron over a simple dress, her hair pulled back, a pen tucked behind her ear. She looked happy. She looked powerful. It was a jarring image that didn't fit the narrative he had constructed for himself, the broken woman he had left behind. Decisive moment. The real confrontation, however, came at a city-sponsored festival, the Madrid Flavors Festival. Sabores de Hogar had a prominent booth, and Sophia was personally handing out samples of her new seasonal creation, a spiced pumpkin and maple tart. The line was one of the longest at the event. Suddenly, a shadow fell over the counter. Sophia looked up from the customer she was serving, and her smile froze. It was Matteo, and at his side, clinging to his arm, was Valeria. Valeria was exactly as Sophia had imagined her, impeccably beautiful, dressed in a designer suit. Her expression was one of bored superiority. Matteo looked uncomfortable, his eyes darting as if searching for an exit. "Sophia," he said, his voice strained. "What a coincidence to see you here. Nice setup." "Matteo," Sophia replied, her voice firm and professional, not betraying the turmoil swirling within her. She nodded politely at Valeria. "Welcome to the Sabore de Hogar booth. Would you like a sample?" The offer threw him off balance. He had expected an emotional scene, perhaps some lingering bitterness. This coolness, this detached civility, was disarming. Valeria let out a small, condescending laugh. "We don't really do street food," she said, her eyes sweeping over the booth with disdain. "But it's adorable what you've done. Really, turning a little hobby into all this." The word hobby was laced with poison. Sophia felt a flash of anger, but refused to let it show. She simply smiled. "It's certainly more than a hobby. It's my business, my career, and it's doing very well." Matteo shifted his weight, clearly wanting the interaction to end. "Well, we should go. We have a reservation at the Clove Club." He named one of the city's most exclusive and expensive restaurants. It was a pathetic, transparent attempt to reassert his status. But before they could leave, a familiar voice boomed from behind them. "Sophia, my dear, these tarts are a triumph, an absolute triumph." It was Don Diego Velasco, the senior partner at Velasco and Solis, Matteo's ultimate boss, a man of immense influence and a known gourmand. He held a half-eaten tart, a look of genuine delight on his face. "Mr. Velasco, I'm glad you like them," Sophia said, her smile now genuine. "Like them? I love them. I want to order 3 dozen for the firm's client reception on Friday," he declared, pulling out his phone to make a note. Then he noticed Matteo and Valeria standing awkwardly to the side. "Matteo, what are you doing here?" Velasco asked, his tone shifting from jovial to professional. "I didn't take you for a man of the people." He then looked from Matteo to Sophia and back again, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "Wait a minute. You're the one Don Diego, a shrewd and perceptive man, left the phrase hanging. The implication was clear. Sophia, seizing the opportunity, extended her hand to the older man. "It's a pleasure to officially meet you, Mr. Velasco. I'm Sofia Garcia, and yes, my team and I would be delighted to cater your reception." She had taken control of the situation, calmly and completely, making a connection with her ex-husband's boss while he stood by. Powerless. The power dynamic had shifted irrevocably. As Don Diego discussed the delivery details with Sofia, Mateo grabbed Valeria's arm and pulled her away, muttering a hasty goodbye. They left without looking back, but Sofia could feel their humiliation like a heat wave. Valeria was furious. "Did you see that? The way he looked at us, the way she acted so high and mighty. She was nobody," Mateo insisted, but his words lacked conviction. He had just witnessed, in a very public and powerful way, that Sofia was now a very important somebody. She was a respected business owner, a colleague of his own boss, and in that moment, in front of the man whose approval he craved most, she had made him feel small and insignificant. The sweet taste of her new life had just become unmistakably bitter. What do you think of Sofia's revenge? Is personal success or seeing your abuser fail the sweetest victory? The final reckoning. The encounter at the festival was a crack in the pristine facade of Mateo and Valeria's life. For Mateo, seeing Sofia's success firsthand and the respect she commanded from his own boss planted a seed of doubt that began to sprout, watered by the growing dissatisfaction in his own life. The intellectual synergy he had boasted about with Valeria had proven to be a ruthless shared ambition that left little room for genuine connection or warmth. Their conversations revolved around money, status, and appearances. The Zenith Tower apartment felt less like a home and more like a showroom, beautiful but cold, lacking the smell of fresh paint and shared dreams that had once filled his apartment with Sofia. For Valeria, the incident was a threat. Sofia was not supposed to be thriving. She was supposed to fade away, a sad footnote in Mateo's past. This prosperous, confident version of her was an unwelcome complication, a rival in a game Valeria was determined to win. Her possessiveness of Mateo intensified. Her criticisms grew sharper, her demands more extravagant. The gilded cage had begun to rattle. The real unraveling, however, began within the walls of Velasco and Solis. Gregorio, Mateo's partner at the firm, was a meticulous and cautious architect who had always been a little wary of Valeria's aggressive corporate style. He began to notice irregularities in the financial projections for the Mirador development project, the same project that had brought Valeria and Mateo together. The figures seemed inflated, and the deadlines for material acquisitions didn't quite add up. He raised his concerns with Mateo, who, blinded by his infatuation and his desire to impress Valeria, dismissed them. "You're being too cautious, Greg," Mateo had said. "Valeria knows what she's doing. This is how big business is done." But Gregorio couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He began his own quiet investigation, working late into the night, cross-referencing invoices and contracts with suppliers. What he uncovered was a carefully constructed web of deception. Valeria had been systematically overbilling the project through a series of shell companies, funneling the excess funds into an offshore account. The primary supplier she had insisted on using, a company named Apex Innovations, was owned by a man named Simon Ray, Valeria's former business partner and ex-lover. They were siphoning millions from Velasco and Solis, planning to bleed the project dry and then disappear. Meanwhile, Sofia's catering for the Velasco and Solis reception was a triumph. The firm's wealthiest and most influential clients raved about the sophisticated pastries and the impeccable service. Don Diego Velasco was so impressed that he offered Sabores de Hogar, a permanent corporate contract, to supply all of their meetings and client events. It was a massive, game-changing deal for Sophia's business. The irony was not lost on her. The firm that had allowed her husband to discard her was now becoming her biggest client. One night, desperate and seeing the walls closing in on him, Gregorio came to the one person he felt he could trust to be discreet and who had a personal stake in the truth: Sophia. He found her in the bakery long after closing, sweeping the floor while Leon slept in his baby carrier in the corner. He laid out his evidence on one of the cafe tables: bank statements, falsified invoices, corporate records linking Valeria to Simon Ray. "I know it's a lot to ask," Gregorio said, his voice thick with stress. "But Mateo won't listen to me. He's completely infatuated. This is going to destroy him, and it could ruin the firm. You're the only one who seemed to be able to talk some sense into him." Sophia looked at the documents, her heart pounding. It was worse than she could have ever imagined. This wasn't just infidelity. It was a calculated criminal conspiracy. She felt a strange, detached pity for Mateo. He had thrown away his family for a woman who was using him as a pawn in a multi-million-euro heist. A week later, Mateo showed up at the door of Sophia's apartment, the one she now rented in a quiet, respectable building 2 blocks from her bakery. He looked terrible. His face was haggard, with dark circles under his eyes. His expensive suit was wrinkled. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice raw. Sophia hesitated. Then she stepped aside. Her small apartment was filled with the signs of her new life: Leon's toys scattered on the rug, sketches of new cake designs on the coffee table, the lingering scent of vanilla. "Valeria's gone," he said, sinking onto her sofa uninvited. She left, emptied the accounts, took everything. Gregorio presented his findings to Velasco this morning. "There's going to be a full-scale investigation. I'm going to be ruined, Sophia. My career is over." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a pathetic, desperate hope. "I made a mistake," he whispered. "A terrible, unforgivable mistake. She was a fantasy, a mirage. You and Leon are my reality. You were always my reality. I was just too stupid to see it." He reached out a hand for hers. "Please, Sophia, let me come home. I can fix this. We can fix this. For Leon, for us." Sophia looked at the man in front of her. The arrogant, cold stranger from that rainy October night was gone, replaced by a broken, desperate shell. For a fleeting moment, she felt a pang of old love, the memory of the life they were supposed to have. But then she looked past him, to the life she had built on her own. She thought of the terror, the tears, the lonely nights, the exhausting work. She thought of Isabel's unyielding support, Don Carlos's quiet faith in her, and the pride she felt every time she turned the key in the door of her own bakery. She gently withdrew her hand. "There is no home for you to come back to, Mateo," she said, her voice soft but unbreakable. "You burned that house down, and you're not welcome in the one I built from the ashes." She saw the last glimmer of hope die in his eyes. He had come to her expecting absolution, a soft place to land. He had fundamentally misunderstood the woman she had become. She was not his backup plan, not a port in his storm. "I need you to leave now, Mateo," she said, walking to the door and opening it. He looked at her, his face a mask of disbelief and despair. He finally understood. He hadn't just lost Valeria and his career. He had lost Sophia completely and irrevocably. He stumbled out of the apartment and into the hallway, a man who had traded a treasure for a handful of glittering dust and was now left with nothing. Sophia proved that true strength lies in the ability to rebuild, not to get even. Her story teaches us that the deepest pain can become the force that propels us to create our best selves. What do you think? Was Sophia's success the sweetest revenge? Let us know in the comments, and if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel so more people can be inspired by stories of triumph like this.